It's so good to see each one of you here this morning and to be able to come to the round table and share with you today on our week number 7, I think, of discipleship, and discuss how we're walking, how we're doing, how we're relating to one another, and relationships. So I thought we'd start this way, just so that everybody could get warmed up a little bit, all right? Nobody has to get up. Nobody's going to have to raise your hand, I promise you this morning. But you're going to say 2 words. All right, so first of all, we're going to choose half of this room, and you guys are going to say the words, "It's complicated." All right, so practice. 1, 2, 3. It's complicated. All right, now you guys remember that because we're going to come back to that, all right? So now we're going to come over to this half of the room with Matt and everything over here, okay? And the 2 words that I'm going to ask you guys to say over here on this side of the room are, "It's complicated." All right, so we're going to practice once on 3. Ready? 1, 2, 3. It's complicated. All right. All right, we got all that out of the way, all right? But we're going to come back to that in just a little bit. When we talk about relationships, we talk about how we're doing in our walk with Jesus. We talk about what kind of an impact we are having perhaps on others. I picked a verse this morning. It's kind of an unusual verse out of the book of Philippians, out of one of Paul's letters. And it just says this in Philippians chapter 2 and verse 3. It says, "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility," this is the important part for all of us today, "but in humility count others more significant than yourself." A verse that completely pushes back against human nature. A verse that says, it's not about me anymore. Because you know what? I think we spend too much time in our lives saying, it's all about me. What's in it for me? How can I make this work for me? So let me ask you, do our relationships that we have with our friends, with our families, with our spouses, with our children, with our co-workers, do they have anything to do with our walk with Jesus at all? I mean, really, okay, so we're quick to answer. Oh, yeah. That's because we're in the black room. We got to say yes this morning. It's mandated, all right? But when we step outside onto the sidewalk, let's just take that same scenario out to the sidewalk. And we find somebody and say, "Hey, I remember you." Do those relationships that we have outside of this room still matter to Jesus? And are they still reflective on our walk? Or on the other side of that coin, can we step back and can we say, what happens outside of here really doesn't have an impact on what happens inside of here? In other words, within these walls, it's great to say, yeah, we're really concerned about this world. We're really concerned about our relationships. We're really concerned about our friends, our co-workers, our children, our parents, our husbands, and our wives. Within this room, it's easy to say that. But when we get outside this room, then does it become all about me again? Is it me time? Early on in I'm going to say because Jody was deeply involved in this early time in our ministry, there was a family in our church, a great family, and they were blended. I don't know what you say today. Then we said they were blended. In other words, he was on his second wife, she was on her second husband through circumstances. And the families come together, her kids, his kids, they were blended. Into the mix comes his issues, her issues, okay? And they blended all those in. when those issues came into the relationship, they grated back and forth. They were meant to be together in so many ways. They were not meant to be together in so many ways. And in other words, we may say, it's complicated, or we may say, it's complicated, all right? So, whenever we would see this family and they would be coming up the sidewalk to the church, people would scatter. Don't be like this, church. Listen close to what I'm saying. Don't be like this. People would scatter because they knew that coming through the doors were not necessarily a husband and wife, a blended family, but coming through the doors were a lot of issues. This family earned the moniker the sad family. That's what they became known as, the sad family. And they attached themselves to Jody and me. They attached themselves to us. They were draining. They really were. They were draining. And I give 1,000% thanks to God today. I'm serious with you. 1,000% thanks to God today for this blended family that attached itself to me, because I was able to grow. And I was able to learn about relationships. Back then, they called it, they said they had a chemical imbalance. Today, I think they call it a couple different things other than that. And many nights, I'd get a phone call and have to run to their house, and one of them was having a meltdown, and the other one was having an attack. And I'm thinking, I don't want to be part of this relationship. But through it all, the Lord honored it. And the difficult relationships that you and I get to be in this morning are building blocks, are stepping stones. They are opportunities for us to demonstrate how good Jesus is truly in our lives. And not only that, but how desperately we need him. And so when the verse says, hey, take and put others, treat them like they're more important, treat them like they have preeminence, treat them like they're special, which they are, better than yourself. And so, as a follower of Christ, we have an opportunity to model Jesus every day. And not only that, but we have an opportunity to see how others react when they see a model of Jesus. So a few years ago, we adopted this little phrase, and this little phrase was, it's complicated, all right? Are we in agreement with that? Whenever somebody would say to, got to be careful of the name I use here today. I'll use Yale since he's probably bulletproof, all right? When somebody say, Yale, how's it going with Autumn? He would say, it's going well, but, some days it's complicated. Okay? I'm telling you right now, it's not. I've watched them, okay? I'm using them as an example, so don't come up to them after church and say, I'm going to be praying for you guys, because it's not that. Or I would say, pray for them anyway. I would say to Yale, how is it going with your children? Well, my daughter got into it with some guy at school, and, they didn't get along, and they threw fists. I mean, it's complicated. We've come to that phrase that instead of saying, hey, my daughter messed up, this little boy messed up, my wife messed up, I messed up, we just kind of lump it all into the it's complicated scenario. When my parents were aging, and we would have to go into the nursing home and minister to them, and their whole nursing home room was about this size right here. And so they had everything they had in this room. And when we brought 2 more chairs in so we could sit down with them, it got very, it was tough. It really was. And my parents, when they aged, they were reverting back towards childhood. In other words, the things that I looked to them for wisdom and for guidance, now they began to look to us for wisdom and for guidance. And I see how people today, how we are trying to navigate life with our parents. I'm telling you today, 99% of this room is younger than we are, Jody and me. Cherish every minute that you have in that relationship with your parents. Every minute, every second. Jody said to me yesterday, she said, you know, when I clean this, it was like a frying pan, what do you call that thing? A skillet. She says, I think of your mom. I thought, we didn't really need to have this conversation right now. And I could see her eyes getting watery, and I could feel my eyes getting watery, and I said, why is it that this skillet reminds you of my mother? And she said, well, she would take this skillet, and after she cooked something, and she would scrape all this stuff out of it and mix it with some water, and my mom would always say, make gravy. That's what I didn't know I was eating that. I really didn't, all right, all those years. I didn't know. Don't eat gravy. If you come to our house, the gravy comes in a packet, all right? Boil water. It got complicated. It got complicated. But I want you to hear my thesis for this message today. I want you to hear clearly where I'm coming from so that it doesn't sound like a cop-out. I know that the Christian life is not always easy. And I'm not going to tell you that relationships between Christians aren't without their speed bumps, the little humps in the road that kind of catch you by surprise. But it's not God that's complicating our pathways in our relationships, not at all. It is not God who created this phrase that's complicated for us to sit here and say, I'm really not going to deal with it, it's just too complicated. In fact, our God is an uncomplicating God. I don't even know if that's a word, but it is now. Our God uncomplicates the things in our lives. And when I say the things in our lives, we're primarily looking at relationships. And if you say my relationship is really, really, really difficult, if you say my relationship is impossible, if you say my relationship is getting more complicated day in and day out, I have to say this, are you in the right relationship? You say, well, I've been married, then I'd say you're in the right relationship. There's no getting out of that one. But I would say this, if you're not married, if you haven't taken that step yet, really analyze where you're at. Because the two people have to be God-honoring and have to bring Christ right into the middle of this relationship, and He will uncomplicate the things in our lives that we seem to have so much trouble with. How can you be sure that this is? There was a verse that I gave to Brian this morning. He'll put it up for us right now. And it was one of my favorite verses. It came to me from the book of Colossians, another one of Paul's letters. And he says this in Colossians chapter 1. He said, everything was created through Him and for Him. Parentheses. Everything was created through Him and for Him. You and me. That's what the Bible's teaching us here. You and me. We were created for Him. We were created for Him. He existed before anything else. God didn't show up at Genesis 1:1. God was pre-Genesis. God had to create Genesis for there to be a Genesis. He had to make the new beginning before there was a beginning. He existed before anything else. He holds all creation together. As we were coming south today, we left, it was black outside. It was dark, all right? And so we're going slow because my wife is dearly afraid of deer running out in front of us, all right? So we're going slow, and we're coming down the road, and all of a sudden, out to the east, we start to see what? On the horizon, we start to see the sun coming up. And it was beautiful, and we were really enjoying that. And I was reminded that as God, and Jody said, I'd like to get a picture of that, but my camera doesn't get a good picture. That's because God, I don't know why, Jody, I don't know anything about cameras. But I know that God gives us these glimpses of His glory and His majesty and His beauty in all of creations, Romans chapter 1. And when we look at that, we're reminded of a God who cares for us, incredibly cares for us. and He draws us close to Him, and He draws us into a relationship with Him. And it says He holds all creation together. At just the right moment, even though this world was turning towards the east while the sun wasn't moving, I get that right, He was holding it all together so that when it's turning this way, we didn't just fly off that way. He held it all together for us today. He's the beginning. Christ also is the head of the church, which is His body. He's the beginning. He's supreme over all who rise from the dead. Me. He is the first in everything. That's my jam. Right there, I'm telling you. That draws me into Jesus. That makes my relationship and His relationship come onto the same page. So let's get back to our scripture that I started out this morning, and let's talk about relationships and how we're going to mature and how we're going to nurture these relationships. It said in Philippians chapter 2, it said, always put others first. Always put others first. We said several years ago, all you got to do is walk a mile in their shoes, right? All right, Maylene, you're pretty small. All right? If you put on my shoes today and tried to walk a mile, you would trip. You would. You would have great difficulty. So it's not exactly about walking a mile in their shoes. It's about understanding exactly and deeply where everyone is coming from and how we're going to navigate our relationships. Let's just jump, first of all, to the marriage relationship. Husbands and wives. Let me start right there if we could. The first thing that I think that we need to do is make sure that our spouse feels valued. Our spouse feels valued. How can that be? How can we make sure that happens that way? $1980. Is there any pre-1980 people today? All right, yeah, about 5 of us, okay? 1980. Anne Murray. That's Jelly Roll of the 1980s, all right? Anne Murray. She wrote this song, and this song said, I said you want to make your spouse feel valued, make them feel secure. I don't want your spouse to feel on edge ever with you. That's not a God-honoring relationship. Anne Murray said this in the song. She said, could I have this dance for the rest of my life? Would you be my partner every night? When we're together, it feels so right. Could I have this dance for the rest of my life? Oh, I got one anyhow, okay? If you want your relationship with your husband, with your wife, to feel valued, this dance that you're on, I'm talking about life, is for the rest of your life. This dance that you're on doesn't have an end point unless it's when we go to heaven. When we're together, it feels so right. My wife likes the Chicago Cubs. I love the Pittsburgh Pirates. My wife likes to hang stuff on the walls at the house. I like the walls to be like that wall right there. That's a beautiful wall to me. My wife will watch the mail, and when the mail goes, she'll run out to the mailbox, and she brings in this magazine that's called Missouri Quilts. Huh? Yeah, Missouri, okay. Yeah, well, I should. Hey, does the show mean show me more quilts? No. Oh, okay. I think it means show me more quilts, because that's all she talks about is quilts. If she happens to bring in from the mailbox a small brochure on pocket knives, then I go to my chair and I sit down and I begin to look through this brochure on pocket knives. Never do I hear her say while she's sitting beside me, wait, back up a page. I wasn't done looking at that knife. My wife and I are 180 degrees different in many of our likes and dislikes. The relationship comes into the fact that when my wife and I sit on the edge of the bed in the morning and pray, we are 100% in agreement with one another. You can't drive a wedge between us at that point. When my wife and I, when we sit down and we read the Bible together, or when we're discussing what her devotion was, her reading was, or what my reading was, we are 1,000% in agreement. You can't change that. You see, we can be different in many of our, and maybe you guys are the same way. Maybe you can say, my wife and I, we don't see eye to eye on a lot of things. But you know what? When it comes to Jesus, get in the game. Because Jesus is the glue that holds all this together. Whether it's a married relationship, whether it's a dating relationship, whether it's a parent-child relationship, whether it's a child-parent relationship, Jesus is the glue. He's the one that makes it all work every time. So in other words, the first thing I said was always put others first. We got to do that. Second thing I said is be compassionate. We just talked about this a few weeks ago. And everything that you're doing in your life, with your relationships, with your discipleship relationships, with your disciples, with those you're walking alongside of, with your children, with your parents, be compassionate. Be compassionate. I mean that. And the third thing is, I find this ironic. I think you were just talking about this 2 weeks ago. In a relationship, whether it's a married relationship, a dating relationship, a parenting relationship, be generous. Be generous in everything you do. You say, well, it's only so far generosity can go. You know what I mean? No, I don't know what you mean. I really don't know because you see, whenever somebody says be generous, you're thinking, how much money do I have in my pocket? Anyone get? It's not about how much money you have. It's about how you invest your life and your time and your resources. How you invest your wisdom and those that you're walking alongside of. Be generous. If somebody says, can you give me 5 minutes? Give them 10. I'm telling you this. Be generous in what you do. Back again in the 1980s, there was this thing going on that was called Promise Keepers. It's still vaguely out there today. But I remember I went to New Orleans to like a big stadium event, okay? And the place is filled out, full of men, and we were all singing and praising the Lord and learning. And there was a guy, his name's Crawford Loritz, all right? You may sometimes come across him. And he stood up before us that day and he said, husbands, don't ever let your wives outdo you. Yeah, there you go, Amanda. Was that you? Oh, I'm sorry, Maylee. Okay. Don't ever let your wives outdo you. And I thought, what? What does that mean? But I took away from that meeting that day that I don't want my wife to think, oh no, here he comes. Got to have supper ready, got to have this, got to have clothes, got to shirt on. None of that happens, and it's all good. I don't want her to outdo me. I want to outdo her. I want to be generous to my wife. I want to be generous to my children. I want to be generous to those I'm trying to walk alongside of. This morning, sitting back in the little room, Callie and Caleb are sitting there, right? I wanted to ask Callie something. And I said, hey, Kayla, or Kaylee. And I saw Caleb all at once. He caught it. And I caught it just as it left my mouth. I just called her by the wrong name. Kaylee's this tall. Callie's this tall. I love both of them. I have a relationship with both of them. I really do. I'll walk alongside of both of them at any time. We have a new neighbor. Her name is Kayla. All right? So whenever I was getting ready to say, Callie, how is... And we went on to a conversation, and I said Kayla, and I'm thinking Callie, and I'm thinking Kayla, that's my neighbor. All these, and it was all mixed up, and it was all jumbled around. But listen, we make a lot of mistakes in our relationships, but when you're generous, when you give your time, give your space, give your knowledge, give your wisdom, if you got it in your pocket, give it. I really mean that. It's not doing you any good there. You honor God in the things that you do. See, I believe without God, our lives, our marriage relationships are doomed. They're bound to fail. I really do believe that today. I believe without God in our lives, our friendships are shallow and very short-lived. I believe without God in our lives that purity in dating relationships is extremely unlikely. On the contrast, when God is at the head of our relationship, we have everything going for us. And we have a pathway. My wife and I, we've been married for 48 years. We have more years behind us than we have ahead of us. We don't question that. That's okay with us. But what it does, it tells us we've only got so many years left to make an impact, to invest, to help, to guide, to learn, to walk with others. Be generous. Be generous. As I step back and I look and see what things are destructive in lives today, I wrote down 3 things here. Disagreement in the roles and responsibilities of marriage. Disagreement in the roles and responsibility of the marriage. This is why we have so many single-parent homes. When I lived on the east side, that's all up and down the streets. All you saw was little kids with generally a mother or a grandmother. The homes, the families were so dysfunctional. There was too many, I'm going to say it, there's too many men on drugs, too many men with these addictions. Drugs or alcohol or serial cheating or pornography that were just sucking the life out of any family unit. It was all such a destructive pattern. And there was too many women that, you're not going to get out of it. There was too many women that were abandoning the principles of monogamy, probably modesty, perhaps embracing the killing of a preborn baby. Yeah, I know that's there's too many disagreements in parenting. I got a secret for you. My generation didn't get it right, Jim. We didn't get it right. But I got another secret for you, Jim. My parents' generation, they didn't get it right either. I got a secret for you, Kristen. Your generation probably won't get it right either. You see, as a society, we blow it every day. What we have to do is we have to bring Jesus into the midst of every relationship that we have. We have to bring and have him as our guidepost. People say, oh yeah, it happened when we took prayer out of school. No, it didn't. We were praying at home. Why were we worried about praying at school? All right, yeah, I believe we should pray at school. In fact, the other day, I almost asked Kaylee this morning. The other day, you guys aren't going to believe this. We're going to finish soon. Whenever I was younger, and we would say the Pledge of Allegiance in class, after we sang the Pledge of Allegiance, I don't know if you had to do this or not, Jody. While we were standing up, we had to sing this. My country, 'tis of thee. Did you ever? Did you sing that? All right, Connie. All right. We had to sing, as a group, we had to sing, My country, 'tis of the sweet land of... Every time we had to sing this, all right? We weren't getting it right. We sang it, but we blew it. It wasn't about learning the words and singing the song. It was about the fact that Jesus is our only guide. I love the flag as much as the next guy. I have one, a giant one, hanging in my house where I have my little space that Jody didn't hang anything on the walls. I got this spot, all right? I love that flag, but that flag is not my salvation. Jesus is. And as I glue myself to him, then my relationship with my wife gets better. And as I glue myself with him, my relationship with my sons and my daughter, it gets better. I have a neighbor who's Colombian, Juan. Yeah. Her name is Lucia. Lucia loves to cook and bring stuff over to our house. We love it when Lucia, yeah, it's a good neighbor, you're right. We love it when Lucia knocks on our door because it's not a hamburger, Juan. It's something, almost like an empanada. It's something from Colombia, and she'll tell me the story all about it. You see, what Lucia and I have in common is a belief in God. What Lucia and I don't have in common yet is her relationship with God. So my choice is this. Don't answer the door. Lucia's there. Or, come on in, Lucia. What'd you bring me today? That looks great. That looks fantastic. Sit down here. Let's talk. Let's have a coffee together. Jesus in the center of relationships always makes it right. Confession time. You don't have to raise your hand. I promised you wouldn't have to. Has anyone ever seen the Ocean's movies? I tell you, I think I heard a yes. I don't know what number is because I think there's 11, 12, 13. I don't know all the numbers, all right? I just watch them because me and George Clooney, all right? So there's this Ocean's movie. And in this Ocean's movie, George Clooney and Julia Roberts are separated. And Julia Roberts has attached herself to the owner of the casino, Andy Garcia, otherwise known as Terry Benedict, all right? In Ocean's 11, all right? So she's attached herself. I don't know if she married him. I don't have any idea what's going on here. But there comes a point in the movie where Terry Benedict, Andy Garcia, loses all the money in his casino. And he was very jealous of it. He wanted that money back. And one of the con men got Terry Benedict, Andy Garcia, to say, if you could have your money back, or have your wife, or have Tess, Julia Roberts, which would it be? And Andy Garcia said it would be the money. And that was in the casino. And in the casino, there's all these cameras everywhere watching everything that you're doing, right? So immediately, this is great. Hollywood's great. Immediately, they broadcast this to Julia Roberts to show her how her husband really is. And Julia Roberts, she gets mad and she storms out of the casino. And as she's going out of the casino, who does she run into? She runs into Andy Garcia, her significant other. It's complicated, all right? She runs into him. And they have a little discussion. And Julia Roberts said to Andy, to Terry Benedict, surely you should know that in your casino, somebody is always watching, all right? All right. You're never going to be able to say, you're never going to believe what the preacher preached on this morning, all right? Here, come back with me now. In your life, in your relationships, in how you're walking daily, someone is always watching. Someone is always watching. Young couples are watching married couples to see how they navigate. Married couples are watching their parents to see how they made it. children are watching their mom and dad because they need a positive model. And if children are seeing junk from their parents, listen to what I'm going to say. Their level of junk is going to be 1 degree worse than their parents' level of junk. And their children's level of junk is going to be 1 or 2 degrees worse than their level or their grandparents' level of junk. Everything is disintegrating. So somebody is always watching. So we keep that in mind in our discipleship relationships. And as we're walking along, we have to get it done right. There isn't an option. So here's what I want you to do. Considering that somebody's always watching, husbands, you know who you are. Your goal this week is to put every one of your wife's needs before your own needs. Every one of your wife's needs before your own needs. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3. Every one of your wife's needs before your husband's needs. Wives, your goal this week is to be the biggest cheerleader that your husband has on the face of this earth. I'm telling you, you tell him everything he has done right this week. And when you're tempted to tell him something he's done wrong, bite your tongue. Parents, your goal this week is to model Jesus. Model Jesus to your children. I'll tell you what I mean by that. In every decision you make, you seek Jesus. When your children are watching you, you tell them, I'm asking Jesus what I should do. If your children see you getting away with junk, they're going to try to get away with the same junk. You've only got one chance, parents. Do it right. Do it right. In dating relationships, Matt and Abby got married. Caleb and Callie got married. Oh, yeah. Kenya and Rosa. All right. Busted. In dating relationships, not only those that may be in this room that are dating this morning, but your disciples. You may have some disciples that are dating. Your goal this week is to reestablish godly boundaries in decisions that you make so that you can have some principles, some safeguards in your relationships. So that 3 months, 6 months down the road, you don't say, man, I blew it. I messed up. I wished I hadn't done that. I gave something the way that I can't ever get back. And at the time, I thought it was worth it, but it clearly wasn't. In dating relationships, establish some boundaries. I don't know if you've ever had a chance to watch Duck Dynasty. That's my jam, all right? Phil and Kate often talk about when they were dating, and I haven't seen the movie, often talk about when they were dating, who was in the back seat of the car? Uncle Si. All right? Uncle Si was a chaperone whenever they were dating. How did it work out? I'm not sure. But hey, you know what? Dating relationships, get an Uncle Si. Go ahead, get one. Put him in the back seat of your car. Go with you. Don't take that chance. Establish some boundaries. What do I have to say to the discipler today? To the discipler, know your disciple, obviously. If you're married and you're discipling a single person, coach them from the perspective of they will one day be getting married. They'll be making a decision for their life. Coach them in that way. Model that for them. If you're single and you're discipling a married person, not highly recommended, but it happens, okay? Encourage them in making Christ the dead center of that relationship so that there's never the phrase, it's complicated, all right? If you're single and you're married and you're mentoring another single person, begin to challenge them on issues of purity, morality, transparency in their life. If you're discipling someone with children, this is going to hit. If you're discipling someone with children, Ben, 2 rows behind you is your Aunt Jody. I mean that. She's your aunt. No, I don't want to confuse you. Not by blood, but because she loves you and she looks over you. If you're discipling someone with children, be their aunt, be their uncle. Be the one that they don't have in their life. When we went to the mission field in 2000, we were exposed immediately to about 70 other American families that were working in the region we were working in. And their kids would come running up to us, and we went, man, I've already had my kids, all right? What are you doing here? Their kids would come running up to us and say, Uncle Rich. And I thought, I'm not your uncle. But after about 3 or 4 months, you know what? My arms are out. Uncle Rich, yeah, come on. And we had the best time ever. And still to this day on the Facebook, one of them will write me a message, and they're grown up and they got their own kids. But what do they call me? Uncle Rich. Because in relationships, you take time, you're generous, you invest, you make them feel more important, you make them feel secure. That's even more important with children. So adults in this room today, from Callie's height all the way up, all right? Adults in this room today, be an aunt and an uncle. You say, but they got good parents. I know they got good parents. Those good parents need a break every now and then. Be the aunt and uncle. Speak into their lives. Speak Jesus. Tell them Bible stories. To the disciples, seek out a discipler who can model Jesus for you in the good times and in the tough times. Disciples, seek out someone that can model Jesus for you in the good times and in the tough times. Whenever I was seeking a discipler, probably know it, John Dennert was my discipler. And John and I would meet every Friday night or every other Friday night. And we always met at the same place, Bento's. All right? And we always ate some Asian food. And did I seek John out because I knew that John had so much experience as a married person? Obviously not. Did I seek John out because I knew he was a great parent? No. I sought John out because I knew he would say, no, that's BS, Rich. You're not doing that. Forget about that. That's not the right way to look at this. I sought him out because I knew that he would make me accountable. Disciples in your relationships, seek out somebody that will hold you accountable. I'm not telling you got to write everything down, but I'm telling you there are landmines, there are stumbling blocks in our relationships, and we need to try to safeguard against them. Disciples today, I want you to do something Cody Clark taught me. Oh, brutal, all right? It's complicated, all right? Disciples today, I want you to consider doing this. Get yourself a little tablet and write yourself a journal. Write down the things that are going on in your life because you're only with your discipler a couple hours a week and you're away from them a couple hundred hours, it seems like it, every week, okay? Take time and journal what's going on in your life so when you get back to your discipler, you can begin to talk to him about what's going on. If you're in this room today, and well, of course you are, all right. So to everyone in this room today, if there is anyone in this room today suffering from addictions, if there are things in your life that you're ashamed of, that this great big screen behind me, that if all of a sudden it come bright with your darkest hours, seek out a discipler that will help you walk through that. And will say, that's enough. No more. We don't need that. Have your discipler help you build a firewall. I'm not talking about in tech. I'm talking about in life. And Jesus is that firewall. He will help you from making that step where you shouldn't go. Autumn, you and your group come back up right now. On your response card when you come in this morning, or if you're using the app, there are 3 points in there. And here's what I'd ask you to do if you would, after you get your name and stuff on them, if you just take and put a check mark where it might apply to you. And you know what? As I was going through them, they really did have something to do with each one of us. Point number 1, I'm seeking help uncomplicating things in my life, and I need somebody to disciple me. You say, well, yeah, I meet with my discipler. How often? How well? How good are you doing? Do you need to make a change? Is it time to have another person? Is it time for a different perspective? You're drowning things, look to the uncomplicating God. He really has a desire for you. If that's your case, make a check there. We can help you with that. Number 2, I need a godly influence in my life as I'm making parenting decisions. If I could have had this box to check 4 years ago when my parents were finishing their journey, I'd be checking this box right now. Because they were really struggling with the end-of-life decisions, and I was having to make them for them. And I realize that many of you today are not at the point in your life where you're struggling with making end-of-life decisions, but parenting is all about preparing. And parenting is all about modeling. And parenting is all about loving unconditionally. Maybe that's your case today, and you need somebody to walk alongside of you as you're trying to make those decisions. You say, I made 10 decisions this week. 8 of them good, 2 of them bad. I'm on the upside. No. Let's get to 10 out of 10. Let's make Jesus the center of every decision we make. Or third, I'm drowning in addictions that are destroying my relationships, and I want to make a change. If you're too ashamed to check that box, that's exactly why you should check that box. If you're drowning in addictions, you don't have to be that way. There is no reason that it has to be that way. God's plan is always brighter, it's always better, it's always purer. And He wants you to walk with Him in that way. Would you pray with me right now? Father God, Lord, for those in the room today, if we've checked any of those 3 boxes, if we checked all 3 of those boxes, I don't know, Father. But I do know this, Father, that if I come into this room without you, and if I leave this room without you, that's the biggest mistake I can make today. So, Father, I ask that you would just take and fill each one of us with your Holy Spirit, Lord. That we would be transparent, Lord, that we would do business with you this day. Father, that we would say, enough, that's enough, stop, basta. And Lord, that we would say, from this point forward, Lord, we're walking with you day in, day out. We're teaching our disciples what it means to have that close relationship with Jesus. We're learning from our disciples who are walking close with Jesus. We're looking at our nieces, our nephews. We're looking at our aunts and our uncles. We're looking at our parents. We're looking at all these relationships. We're saying, I see Jesus there, and we're rejoicing in it. And Father, for those relationships yet that we don't see Jesus, Lord, help us to get to that next step. Because you're pure, you're higher, you're holier, you're greater than anything this world has to offer. So Jesus, we love you today. In this time, would you move in this room? In your name we pray, amen. If any of these things have kind of resonated today, you might just need to get up and go to the back of the room. Someone will meet you there. You can talk it out, you can pray about it. Don't try to leave this room and fall back onto that, it's complicated. Leave all those complications to God today because He loves you. God bless you today.